Hey guys, it's James here, and I'm so glad to see you here. Sorry I haven't been uploading much lately. I've been super busy with getting my new studio set up with acoustic treatment and fine-tuning the acoustics of the room, which takes an absurd amount of dedication, time, and effort. But today, I'm going to talk to you about the recently released Jens Bogren signature drum samples library. It's a library with awesome drum samples that Bogren himself used in many of his mixes. Before I talk more about the sample library, let me show you the drum tone in the mix created exclusively with toms, snare, and kick samples from this very drum library. So what did you think of the drum tones? Let me know in the comments. I want to thank Corey Alexander of Hellfire for writing this brilliant demo. I will actually be mixing and mastering their upcoming record called Trauma Response, so be sure to check them out and follow them with the links in the description. I personally think the drum samples are excellent and a breath of fresh air among the ubiquitous Superior Drummer samples and Get Good Drum samples. To me, Bogren's drum tones usually have a rather dry, natural, but at the same time smacking kind of characteristic. And that's certainly reflected in this sample library, especially the snares. They sound really natural, but somehow they cut through the mix really well. When I was mixing the demo, it was really easy to get the snare to sit well with the guitars and the bass. One thing I particularly love about this library is that these snare samples are extremely good for layering on top of each other. With some other drum libraries, when you layer multiple snares together, sometimes you run into phase issues or the low end of the combined snare tone just doesn't sound right because the sample's fundamental frequencies happen to be dissonant with each other. But that's not the case with these Jens Bogren's drum samples. For example, let's take a listen to the snare tone I created for the demo. Pretty tight and full of smack. As you can see here, the snare tone is consisted of 3 different drum snare samples. The first one is Chungy, which is kind of like a deep sounding snare with a long decay, kind of like a Black Beauty snare. The second one is Fister Than Light, which is a very tight and also deep sounding snare. The last one, Spike Me In, is basically what sounds like a snare side stick sample. I blended it in so that the snare can have a little bit more attack in the mix. It's not a huge difference, but this is without. This is with the side stick. You can hear just a little bit more of the attack in the snare. Now let's take a look at the kick. As you can see here, the kick is also consisted of 3 different kick samples. This is what it sounds like together. Now all these different samples, they all sound pretty similar on their own. So this one sounds like this. This is the second one. The last one. They all have a very similar sound, but once I combine them, the kick now has a really nice oomph that you can feel in your chest. You get really good smack and really good oomph in the low end. That's why I combined them. For the toms, I used the original set. It's a 4-piece tom set. And if you look at the mixer here, you can see that all I really did was EQing the toms because there's really nothing much else I needed to do to them. They already sound pretty good. I'll just quickly show you what they sound like. That's the first tom. This is second tom. And the third tom. This is the last one. Very beefy, low-tuned toms, and lots of attack, which I really like. Now I want to summarize the pros and cons of this library, and talk about who I think this library is for. On the pros side, I love that the library comes with a variety of formats. On top of WAV files and TCI files for the Slate trigger, you can also get it in NKI format with the deluxe version, which allows the library to be used in different scenarios. You can use the TCI files when you want to use Slate trigger to layer the Bogren samples on top of real drums, or you can use the NKI file when you want to program in the drums. Which brings me to another strength of this library. It has velocity layers and round robins. So unlike one-shot samples, you don't have to use them with drum tracks containing velocities already, such as real drums or programmed drums. If you're ever in a situation where you want to layer just the overhead, you can do that as well because you also have access to the individual microphones, although those only come in WAV files and TCI files. Dry samples are also available as well, but again, they only come in WAV files and TZIF files. Lastly, the biggest strength of this library is obviously the sound. It's different, it's unique, and it's unmistakably Jens Bogren. With all the praises aside, the library is not without flaws. If you have watched my other reviews of drum sample libraries, you know I'm an advocate for high velocity layers. And I'm sad to say that this Jens Bogren signature drum library offers very few velocity layers. Only 6 layers for snares, 5 for kicks, and 4 for toms, which is enough if you are layering and working with drum performances that don't have a lot of dynamic range. So who's this library for? If you're looking for a full-fledged drum sample library with extensive sampling and lots of articulations, this library is not for you. If you're looking for a diverse drum library that you can use in every genre, this library is also not for you. But if you are a producer or mixing engineer working in the rock and metal genres, if you are a fan of Jens Bogren's drum sounds, and if you also have Slate Trigger or the full version of Contact, you would absolutely love this library. Lastly, if you want to experiment with some new drum tones because you're tired of using GGD, SSD, or Superior drummer libraries, the Jens Bogren Signature Drums is no doubt a great library for sprucing up your current drum tones. That's it for this video. Give it a like if you find it helpful, and subscribe if you are into audio engineering and music production. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.